Going to give you a forward line here, lads. Alan Brogan, McNulty, Ray Cosgrove, Jason Sherlock coming into the mix. Senan Connell, Desi Farrell, Shane Ryan playing balls into them. Diarmuid Marsden, Ronan Clark, Stephen McDonnell, McKeever, McEntee, McConville playing balls into them. My God, tell me that this isn't football at its peak, Alan Brogan.
Yeah, it was. Without getting too nostalgic about it, it was, I don't know, call it real football, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Funny when you look back on it, now and you see the speed of the way the ball was moved into forward lines and stuff. It was a dream. It was a dream for the likes of myself and Cozzy and stuff. And I know that year we'd worked really hard with Tommy Lyons on our movement and stuff. And look, unfortunately, that day against Armagh, we came up against a team that was probably a bit further down the road than us. But there was some amazing footballers in show that day. And it's only when you look back, you can forget as time goes past, but when you look back at the clips and stuff, and you see, wow, that was amazing, yeah.
Well, you're a good man because you spanned the sort of change of football then as well. So I think you had it during the best era ever, and then it went into that era what it became then. So you sort of saw it both ways then. Were you like, were you sitting around during the tens being like, lads, this used to be way better a few years back?
Yeah, I think when you're in it, it's not until you actually stop and look back and think, God, look how much that changed. I think when you're in it, you're kind of evolving with it, and you don't really notice. And it's only afterwards, God, maybe if we'd have tweaked that a little bit sooner, things could have been a little bit different. But when you're in it, you're just playing it the way it is, and like that's where you look at some of the coaches and the real visionaries look, obviously we talk about Jim McGuinness and the likes, even Jim Gavin, some of the real visionaries in the game that can change the way football is played. Like they're really special people to be able to do that. But I think for me playing, I always just played the game in front of me. Didn't think too much about what was ahead or what was behind. I just played as the ball was coming in. Yeah. That was always my approach, and I never got too high or too low about things. And I suppose that probably helped me over the course of the years. That I don't know, you can say my confidence never really suffered or whatever, even when I had a bad day, because I was just focused on what was coming next and never thought about what was going behind.
Yeah, because Ray, we were just saying beforehand that, you know, like the forwards back then, it was like the attitude was give the ball in and I'll win it, and if I don't win it, it's my fault, so don't worry about it. And you were a great man for winning the ball. No matter who was around you, you were going at them, even if there were three men around you.
Yeah, I agree with Bogey there. The game has transformed so much. Back in 2002, you know, be it a half back or a midfielder, you know, once you made a run, the ball was given into space. Whereas now the game is completely different now. The game is being analysed. Fellas are afraid to kick the ball away, a turnover against them. But you could play with abandonment. You could play with freedom. You know, back in the day, Brogy, we could kick wides, you know, good wides as Tommy would call them. But you weren't walking in at half time thinking, geez, I'm going to get the shepherd's hook here now. If you kick two or three kick two or three wides. Whereas now there's so much analysis. There's so many guys standing on the sideline with iPads. You know, you're literally afraid to pull the trigger. And I think that's the game it's probably gone backwards a little bit, where the ball is being retained and across the field and backwards. Whereas back in 2002, you can, like, if you watch the clips, you know, it was 1v1, you know, ball being put in and, you know, keep the ball moving. And, you know, it was a joy to play, and it's quite frustrating to watch now at the moment.
Yeah, and you were the other one in that 1v1 battle. Like, you were the one that had to keep an eye on the like of Alan Brogan in 2002. Like, was that just part of the game back then, or do you still look back now and think, oh Jesus, I don't like the thought of that. I don't like going out one-on-one in that space in Croke Park?
I think we all look back with either orange tinted glasses or blue tinted glasses. I tell you what I remember vividly. I was marking Alan Brogan that day, and I'll be honest, I was nervous as a kitten going in. I knew Alan could clean anybody out on a day. I'd watched them enough times at club level and county level. Cossie at that stage was running for Player of the Year. I think that's a fair comment. Alan and Cossie would probably both agree with me. Ray Cosgrove was absolutely on fire. I think we were lucky enough to probably curb you a little bit that day, Ray, because we were so concerned that you could leave us all in your wake, to be really honest. So we went into the game really nervous. We knew we had to be on our game or Dublin could have absolutely destroyed us. And I think that's a good way to go into a game. And I think possibly the Dublin players going into the game this weekend thinking that either we're absolutely on our A game or Armagh could take us. So, you know, always an advantage to go in a little bit afraid, I think. Alan really openly in the warm-up, I was so nervous I was going to go to Joe and say my hamstrings popped here. I'm not really, honest to God, I've talked about this many times. I was so nervous in the national anthem that I honestly was going to say I'm sick or get some excuse to get the hell out of it. And I tell your listeners why. The stadium was hopping. I can never remember Gaelic football that there wasn't as much resonance in the stadium. The stadium was hopping. It was electric with blue and orange. And in the middle of this, I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to face into this formidable forward line, and how are we going to deal with it? But for whatever reason, I used my training and my mental training. In the parade, I got control of my breathing. I got control of my thoughts. I got control of my body language, and I made a decision in my head. I'm going to go for it. Alan, you may or may not remember the first ball in the game actually came in between me and you. It bounced at a nice height, at just a perfect height. Both of us jumped. By luck, I got my fist to it. It broke. It bounced the ball. It broke nicely from it. I grabbed the ball. I took a solo, a hand passed it, I think, to Paul McGrain, and my nerves was gone. And I probably played one of the best halves of football I ever played in my whole life. So I'm just saying that's my memory of that really famous day in headquarters.
Were you licking your lips when you see a nervous cornerback coming up against you?
I certainly didn't notice that nervousness ending now, being honest with you. But yeah, like I suppose for us, we were, well, kind of certainly me, I was 19, kind of going in to play this game, like, because he was a few years older, but we were still fresh enough. Like Dublin hadn't won a Leinster since 1995. It was our first Leinster. We were full of confidence, but at the same time we were going in to play Armagh, who'd been on the road a couple of years, had been unlucky the few years before, and like, if you think about the game now, some of the cornerbacks back then, like specialist cornerbacks, the likes of Enda, the likes of Francie Bellew, lads who had to play with 50 yards or 60 yards of space in front of them. Now, I know Kieran McGeeney did give a bit of cover. He kind of played that centre-back role so well, which was probably ahead of his time at that stage. So he gave his full back line a little bit of cover, but there was still oceans of space in Croke Park. The ball could be launched in and there's 50 yards in front of you. I do remember the first ball that came in and Enda won it, and it took me a while to settle in that game. I think I probably did a bit better in the second half, got a couple of scores in the second half. But there's one real thing I remember about that day, and I think it was in the second half. I'd lost Enda somewhere around field. I got through on the right hand side of the goal, and I was bearing down the right hand side of the goal for a tap over score. And out of nowhere, Kieran McGeeney came with this block, and he just, with a diving block, and he caught it with his fingertip, and it just put it off by a couple of feet, and it went wide for a 50. And I was like, oh fucking, like, we are in trouble here now with a block like that. I didn't even see him coming. He got a hand out of nowhere, and I suppose that did typify that Armagh team. And look, we were unlucky that day, obviously. I'm sure Cosy speak about his free at the end, but it could have went to replay. Would we run a replay? I think that Armagh team was a little bit further down the road with us, and so look, we'd won our Leinster. Were we happy with our lot at that stage? It would have been great to go on, but I think certainly Armagh deserved to win that game in the end and to go on and win the All Ireland. It
was striking. I can remember Tommy Lyons being interviewed after, and he seemed happy that he just watched a great match. He was talking about being breathless, and it didn't seem that. He was disappointed, but it was like, we gave it a good rattle. We lost by a point. That was the sort of feeling around the place. And you mentioned the free. All three of you were involved in that. So, Alan, you actually turned it over off Kieran McGeeney. Like, I think the two of you were hunting him down, and you got the tackle in, and McGeeney spills it, and Sherlock gave it to you.
That sight now is few and far between. Myself and Ray getting a turnover.
Had to rewind it on that way.
Sure, double take on that. Yeah.
You must have been desperate at the time, but and then you have the ball, Ray, and then Enda, was it a foul? You fouled him. There's still a debate going on.
That firm. I think it was very soft off. I think I might have tripped over my own legs, or there was a few balls. It was soft, I have to be honest. I had my back to the goal as well, so I think Enda was kind of ushering me, and there was a few bodies around. But as things go, I definitely think it was a soft one. Yeah,
I saw an interview of you then a few years later. You said if I could rewind the clock, I would take an extra 10 seconds over that free and maybe even hit it off the ground.
In hindsight, I was probably a little bit too cautious with it. The first thought goes through your head is you obviously it's the score to equalise. You don't want to screwing off the side of your foot and make an absolute dog's dinner of it. So I erred on the side of caution. I said, listen, I'll attempt to curl this in off the right side, and I probably started a bit too far. I probably didn't kick it with enough conviction. I was just trying to cozy it in off the right hand side, and unfortunately she wasn't a couple of inches the wrong side of it.
Yeah. What were you thinking then, Enda? Because you've obviously given away the free. So are you thinking, please, hit the post, go wide, miss kick it?
I was thinking, I'll be honest, what I was thinking was get on the break.
Yeah.
What I remember about after cut was, in fairness, you hit the post, the ball broke. 4 Armagh's players jumped. Desi was the only one in the middle of that group, I think. I think he ended up getting his fist to the ball. So I tell you what I was thinking of, get on the break. Forget about what I've just done and figure out how to make sure we close this game out.
Yeah. Ray, like Will was telling me beforehand, you scored 6 goals in that championship, and in the last 50 years, no one has scored more goals in a championship campaign than you have. So Bernard Brogan did it at one stage, and Cillian O'Connor did it at another stage. But up until then, like before 2013, I think it was, like years and years and years had gone by without anybody scoring that much. So you were red hot, and not even this game. I think you scored 4 from play as well.
Yeah.
So you were obviously feeling good before that free.
Absolutely, but like I suppose it was the World Cup summer, and Bogey agree. Like every day that we played, the sun was shining. We started Dr. Cullen.
Yeah.
I think Ireland played Cameroon that day, and there was a few streakers across the pitch that had been watching the game that morning. But we were blessed. Like every day in Croke or Bogey, there was no wet day. The sun was shining. The hill was in full flow. And I was lucky. I was very fortunate. I got on the end of a few goals. Lads put them on and played for me, and finished up with 6. But I didn't realise it was 50 years that 6 goals had been scored in the summer.
Will is our history books man.
Oh man, Will, good stats there.
I think being fair to Cosy, some of his goals, he's probably been a bit modest there. Some of his goals that summer were exceptional, like some of the finishes, and he had this, like he was obviously watching the World Cup, because for most of his goals he had the celebration to go with him as well. That's not something you really see anymore now. There's no celebration, so like I think that's, even though we were beaten, I think for Dubs that summer we obviously hadn't been even involved at that stage. Or Dublin supporters hadn't seen us at that stage in so long. It was like the crowds came out in huge numbers. When you look at it now, like we 75,000 at Leinster quarter, Leinster semi-finals. It was unbelievable. So kind of for us in our first, because he had been playing a few years, but it was the first year that team being together. It was an electric summer, and despite being kind of beaten by Armagh in the semi-final, as you say, like I do look back on it with fond memories. If it had been at the end of my career, probably would be looking back slightly different on it as a missed opportunity. But I think, as I said, to be fair, we were probably beaten by an Armagh team that was a little bit further down the road. But as Enda said, kind of before we started, I've great memories of that summer, and like including that game, to pitch yourselves against some of those, against some of the guys in that Armagh team, the likes of Enda, the likes of Justin McNulty, Francie Bellew, Kieran McGeeney, Paul McGrain, McConville, these lads. It was very special for me.
It was unreal. Ray, how did you find that Croke Park factor? Because I remember, I think it was 2004. Derry played Westmeath in the quarter-final. I'm sure you all remember that. And Kerry were playing Dublin straight afterwards. So there was actually a pitch invasion by the Derry fans because they'd won the quarter-final against Westmeath. We'd all run on, but we had to get off because Dublin and Kerry were warming up. But so we're sitting amongst a lot of Dublin fans, and it's like, it's electric and it's scary, once you're going well and Kieran Whelan's catching the ball and everyone's behind you. But I did find as well, once something went bad, once somebody miskicked it, there was a lot of pressure then as well. So it was like it could go either way. I always felt during that period with the Dublin fans, did you feel that on the pitch?
Yeah, well, as Bogey said, like there was 75,000+ at nearly all the games, the Meath game, the Kildare-Leinster final, and then the 2 Donegal games. And then, as Enda mentioned, like there was nothing but blue and orange.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere, the noise in the stadium that day was unbelievable. But I suppose we fed off the crowd, Brogan, I'd have to think, because you mentioned Tommy being content with losing a semi-final. It was Tommy's first year. We were basically just taking every game as it came, Conan. So we didn't harbour ambitions of winning All Irelands. We were a team in its infancy. Bogey in his first year, Katzer, Paul Casey, Johnny McNally. So it was a new team, whereas Enda's team, that Joe Kieran team, they'd won a couple of Ulster championships and were battled hard, and they were a little bit further down the development road than we were. The likes of Geezer, Paul McGrain, Dermot Marsden, the whole lot. We didn't go into the game fearing Armagh, but I think the guys were further down the curve than we were. And the hill in full flow on any day, it does. You do try and feed off it.
Yeah, no, it is. It's.
I think Enda mentioned it there. Like what kind of sums it up for me is when Cossy's free came back off the post. 4 of us were looking at it. 4 Armagh men were mentally tuned into it. And
they'd been there.
They'd been there. That just kind of sums up like the small difference between the two teams in that day. And like if we'd have been a bit more tuned into that, one of us could have been standing underneath that and might have been an easy tapper over.
But that is, but that is, I suppose, what makes the build-up interesting, Enda, because obviously you had the near misses. It was Galway, Kerry, so he had been down there before and didn't want it to happen again. But we've just played some audio of Joe Kernan, and it's so similar to Rian O'Neill last year as well, in the semi-final, talking about being written off, nobody giving us a chance. In the changing room, was that all the talk? Like, were you fueled by being written off going into this match?
I remember I was actually working in Dublin at the time for Ballyboden St Enda's. I was coaching young kids all day, every day, and I'll never forget that the week before the match we were having a summer camp in Ballyboden. There was 700 children in the summer camp. I just show you, there's probably not 700 kids in all the summer camps in Armagh during the summer, but anyway,
Yeah.
I'm giving you a comparison. There was 700 kids at summer camp, and I invited down Ronan Clark, who was 19 years of age, probably similar to your age, Alan, at the time. And I remember inviting down Ronan Clark to sign signatures and with some of the Dublin players in as well as some of the old Dublin players in. And I'll never forget what the kids were saying to Ronan Clark. They were saying, how are you going to be ready to deal with that incredible full-back line of Dublin,
Yeah.
Like you think about your full-back line, folks, we haven't talked about them. We talked about your forward line. Think about your full-back line. Paddy Christie was a formidable player. And the players in Ballyboden, the young players were saying to Clarkie, how are you going to deal with Paddy Christie? I could never forget his confidence. One night in training the week before that game, Ronan Clark scored 30 goals out of 30 shots against Benny Tierney in one-on-one. He was on fire.
Wow.
I've never seen a young player being as confident. So going into the game, how are we feeling? We knew this was 50-50. We were lucky, I would say, because he's one hit the post. But Kieran Whelan also went down the middle of our defence and hit the crossbar. Maybe my memory is way off, but hit the crossbar almost in the black spot. It was like watching a rugby player go down the middle of our defence and striking a ball perfectly, hit the crossbar. I think Tierney got the bounce. At half time, again, we're focused on process. Weren't focusing on anybody writing this off. Weren't focusing on the history. What do we need to do in the next few minutes here to make sure we're in a better place for the second half? We try to be relentless at that. Rather than focus on stuff we can't control, what can we control here? Who needs to get on top of their game? We'd be shouting at each other, whispering at each other, cover in for me here, and Geezer, can you come back a bit closer? We'd be always organising, coordinating, leading, orchestrating. It was always like that at halftime in those Armagh changing rooms.
I'm fascinated by the type of culture that's in every county as well, because obviously every county has a different identity. I know you're a Spurs fan.
Absolutely.
All you ever hear about is the Spurs way, and you don't really know what that is. But is there a Dublin way? Like, is there something that's embedded in the Dublin psyche of how you play football?
Well, I suppose that's somewhere, Tommy would have been very much, he played on the media and getting the city behind us. He really played on it. Back in 2002, nearly every second car around the city had a flag. There was bunting all over the place, big posters on O'Connell Street. So, the one thing Tommy instilled in us is, go and express yourself.
Yeah.
So there was no shackles being put on us, and I suppose that was kind of the culture that Tommy kind of instilled in us. Go out and express yourself and show what you're capable of.
Yeah. And then, Alan, what did you think, if you were thinking about Armagh then, what did you think was the Armagh way then that was coming? Because I think, am I right in saying that and the Armagh team were the first through the wall in terms of conditioning, and they were getting fitter and stronger than everybody else? So when you were going to face them, what are you thinking? This is how they play football?
Yeah, certainly. Like Enda marked me that day. I hadn't seen the inside of a gym hardly. I think I'd have set dumbbells at home and that was it. I'm sure Enda had a few years under his belt at that stage, and they probably were ahead of the curve with that. But I think to come back to Tommy, like Tommy created that summer, kind of that buzz that summer, and people can say what they like about Tommy now. The 2 years after that didn't go that well, but he created something special in the city that summer, that hadn't been there beforehand. Like I said, Dublin had been very tentative for the previous 6 or 7 years, struggling to get it, hadn't got out of Leinster, struggling into Leinster final.
Yeah.
So we did create kind of something special that year, and like we played football. If anything, we probably lacked a bit of tactical nous. We went out, we played football. We probably a little bit open at the back, say, compared to the likes of Armagh. You can see the way Kieran sat back, kind of specialist cornerbacks that just did their job. We were probably a little bit open. That probably caught up on us in the end, and certainly in 2003 and 2004 it did catch up with us. But certainly Tommy created something special that summer, and that's how I went on to play football for the rest of my career. Got a little bit smarter tactically, but certainly went out and I always tried to play football with that sort of, call it what you want, a confidence or a, I don't know, you just try to go out and make stuff happen, and no matter what was going on in a match, it's because he's a bit of freedom. If I miss shots, I tried not to let it faze me. Like, there was a match I remember against Kerry 07, I think at 6 wides and no scores in that match. Like, that was an All-Ireland quarter final. Like, that's shocking for him. I was in the prime of my career then, but you just get back on the horse and you go at it again. That's always the way I looked at it.
It's shocking though if you think of what Ray's saying about like where we look at every single piece of possession and be like, what happened to the ball there? And we probably look at it too much. Like whereas back then it was a different way. I remember looking at the old COVID games. Tomas O'Shea, one of my favourite ever players, but he's just kicking it away. Like that's what you're thinking now when you're used to the game the way it is. But back then that's the way you played.
That's the way it was, Conan. Like there wasn't like I believe the game is being paralysed with analysis. I was involved with the development squad for 4 years, and you know, every kick out, every sideline ball, every possession going into the full forward line, you know, everything's been assessed. Like we were lucky, Bogey, you know, we didn't have to deal with all this additional information that's being put on fellas at half time. You know, we just basically went in, dusted ourselves down, a couple of working points, and out we go again. Whereas now it's OTT as far as I'm concerned. I know there's a certain element of analysis got to be done, but back then, like we didn't. I'm sure the Armagh boys weren't, Joe and the boys weren't overanalyzing the game to death. I think that was a good thing.
No, it was. I think what it's doing now, it's like I think we're now struggling to see players through characters in matches because they've been managed so tightly. Even like if you look at that single game, Dublin Armagh, the amount of characters in that match that you look back at so fondly on both sides for different reasons. Some defenders, some attackers, some midfielders. And I think when I look at games now, like there's players of equal measure going to be playing on Sunday afternoon. Probably even better footballers, better conditioned than we were. But I don't believe we're seeing their true characters because of the way that the game's been managed and the way the game is being played. Now I suppose times move on and that's the way it is. I'm sure it's the same in other sports, but that's for those sort of reasons I look back on the likes of 2002 against Armagh and the games before that so fondly.
Well, Enda, you're, I suppose, a performance coach among other things, but like, is this something that you'd have to wrangle with? Is there elements of the way it was not too long ago that you could probably have in an ideal dressing room right now, especially before games and at halftime?
If you look at the great Dublin Kerry battle of the 70s, like those games were iconic. We can all remember footage of Mullins going toe-to-toe with Jack O'Shea. Like those were iconic gladiators. I'm going to call that Gaelic football 1.0. Gaelic football 2.0 was probably, you know, the 80s, the 90s, and we all started to come on the scene then, obviously, late 90s, 2000s, 2.0. 3.0 was then everybody moved in defensive systems and it went far too defensive. And then obviously the rules, Jim Gavin's done a hell of a job changing the rules again. We're now into 4.0. Yeah. Everybody said me I know about the 30s. I don't know about 30s, so I can't comment on the 30s. So we're into 4.0. I agree with Cosy and agree with Alan that there's lots of things that's resulted in. There's no more huge space in front of the best forwards in the country. I don't think that's going to happen again ever in our lifetime. That's just the way the game is. We're too tactically evolved to go back to that. It'll never be one-on-one. And I'll be honest with you, when you're one-on-one with an Alan Brogan or you're one-on-one with a Maurice Fitzgerald or Mike Frank Russell, it's a lonely place, folks. Doesn't matter how fit and fast you are, it's a very lonely place. That's why we'd be game planning and wargaming, all of that. Before we were encountering Ray Cosgrove, we would have sat down and had, I'd say, 15 conversations about how we're going to make sure that he doesn't get isolated in space here. And we would have role played it on the pitch because you see, weren't able to score as many goals he scored all year. Now, what about the present day? I think there's brilliant things about the game in the present day, and the new rules have changed it. I'm going to challenge us all to think a little bit differently here about the marketing. I think we need to market much better our games. I think we need to market that we've got the best games on the planet. But there's so many games back to back to back that I can't actually keep track of which games is on, who's playing who. I'm confused of who's playing this weekend. I would love to watch more of Derry. I have a huge time for that.
You're not missing much.
Derry will come, I'd say. So I think we need to market the game better. I think there's so many games condensed into a very short space of time, Cosy, and that it's actually hard to know which players are the superstars now. You don't get to watch them. How the hell does a player become a star if you don't get to watch them? And the last thing I'd say is that in terms of how the game's been modified, I think we as fans need to modify our thinking as well. It's not going back the way it was.
Yeah. No, that's probably a good point and a good way to challenge us. And I suppose one thing that Tommy Lyons was good at was not harnessing the crowd, like you say, and bringing the team to the people almost, and making you a team of the people. I always remember in 2003 then, the next year, playing Derry, but it was in Clonus, and you get off the bus and you walk. It was like that old soccer thing you'd hear, like, and you're walking up the Clonus Hill up to the pitch. Do you remember that?
I remember that vividly. Yeah, like Bogey, that was an unbelievable experience, wasn't it? Like, we didn't play a huge amount of games. Obviously, we played Dr. Cullen in the first round of the championship in 2002, and I don't think we got out again till the Derry game up in Clonus. But the crowd in Clonus that day was unbelievable.
I couldn't believe, because I remember going to that match thinking, this is the one time Derry will have a bigger support. I don't know why I thought that. I thought, Dublin won't travel that old troop, and turned the corner at the top of Clonus. It was blue down the hill and blue back up the hill.
Like, we had to go up to a school or something, so we left the pitch and we had to walk up the road, and the crowds either side of the road, and we're with our gear, it
was powerful.
It was unbelievable stuff. But like, I think the spectators even enjoyed it. I know there was busloads of Dublin fans going up to Clonus that day. I highly enjoyed, being on the road. That was a great occasion.
I did. I heard loads of stories after that about busloads of people meeting at the Roseland Inn, meeting here, meeting there, like, and they hop onto the buses and up to Clonus, because it hadn't happened. Hadn't happened too often. Dublin. Probably the time before that was probably Kerry and
Thurles,
down in Thurles 2001. I wasn't around then, but that was the same. I think huge Dublin following, left all on buses, and see, despite what they say, we do enjoy a good day out down the country occasionally.
That was actually your first championship match up in Ulster as well, so you proved you could go up and ransack Ulster. What do you think? Like, is there, like, there's probably not been enough games between Armagh and Dublin to have a real rivalry, but it feels like this, like those two teams in particular, that could have been something special if you had met a bit more. Colin Moran was on, I think it was 2010, after you beat Armagh. He lost 4 games in a row, 2 championship matches, and he said that Armagh were Dublin's bogey team. Did you feel that, Alan?
Yeah, in what year was this?
2010.
2010.
Yeah. So it was the first game you'd beaten, and then you beat them in the round 3 qualifier.
Yeah, they beat us. Armagh beat us in 2003 as well. In the probably about as well that day. We didn't go well in 2003 at all. And I said, I think that Armagh team was probably just a little bit further down the line, and they were probably coming towards their
peak.
Yeah. Whereas we were obviously kind of took us another few years to get going again. But then we played Armagh in 2010 as well. I don't remember too much about that. I don't think I played well that day, to be honest with you. Maybe that one's etched out.
Delete.
Just the fact that he was saying they're a bogey team. Did you have anything like that when you were going to play Armagh? It's like, we haven't beaten these boys.
I don't think so. I think the early, like in 2010, kind of 2002 as well, kind of well to the back of mind by that stage. Obviously,
you're too good a player to ask this stuff. Like, you're just like, give me the ball and I'll score. I don't know who we're playing today. I'm going to put the ball in the net.
A bit like that, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the 2003 game. I think it was Tommy Lyons afterwards. Maybe a bit of a misstep, but Cluxton got sent off in that match. And then Tommy said, they tell me that Stephen Cluxton threw a kick, and if he did, he deserved to go. It was ridiculous stuff. Your goalie getting sent off. It turned the whole game. And I always wondered, is that part of the reason why Cluxton then probably shied away from doing interviews or whatever? Because that was splashed all over the papers.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was. And then there was I think there was a picture of Stephen walking up the canal with his bag on his back afterwards, whatever. And there was a big deal made out of that. But I think in those days we used to head off by ourselves after the match for an hour or two, and then we'd meet back in Jersey. So that was probably normal for him to be walking up to me. Yeah. To meet Joanne or whatever, to meet his family or whatever after the game. But I think Tommy probably made a mistake that day. Probably if you asked now, we'd say maybe it was in the heat of the moment. I'm sure. Look, it's once a game is over for everyone, it's over. It's done. We don't blame anyone. But we were going well that day, I think.
Yeah, with the numerical advantage.
Paddy McKeever got sent off. Yeah, so. But again, like, you could never write off that Armagh team. And once they got a sniff of blood, they were just so experienced at that stage. They were able to bat us out of their way.
Because I was going through all those games for 2008. You played him in a league match up in Crossmaglen as well, so you lost 3 matches in a row. And I see the headline, "We're not a dirty team. Pillar Caffrey defends Alan Brogan."
Got sent off,
I was like, oh my God, let me get into this. And Caffrey said, anyone that knows football knows that Alan Brogan doesn't go out looking for trouble on a football field.
At that stage I was just sick of getting beat by Armagh. You're going up to Crossmaglen again. Like, Armagh are known as a tough team. Like, they've always been, especially that team. Like, their defenders were tough, no nonsense defenders. Could obviously play a bit of football as well, but they were a tough team. I suppose you're going into Crossmaglen, into the Lions, then thinking we'll try and be as brave as we can out here. So I actually started on the bench and I came on. I got a yellow card very quickly, and there was a couple of little skirmishes breaking out around the place, and I think Aidan O'Rourke was marking me, and I threw a shoulder into Aidan O'Rourke, and he threw 2 punches. He threw 2 uppercuts into me that no one saw, like he was, and I think I threw one back and I was put off. I got a red card, but I was only on the field about 7 or 8 minutes, I think. What year was that?
2008.
2008 was it? Yeah.
Was that just, I think you get sent off twice, was it, in your career? Or was that was one of them? And Galway was maybe another one?
Won't go with 3 times. 3 times. Put off against Tyrone as well at one stage.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I think they beat us that day as well, did they?
Yeah.
Well bet.
Enda, did you feed into that though? That the toughness that Alan's talking about. You probably knew, especially the teams coming across McGlen as well, that you're gonna give them an uncomfortable time. Let's say.
Well, it's funny you say about 2003. 2003, we were flat as a pancake before the Dublin game. We were sort of struggling to get our mojo back. I never forget Joe Kiernan the week before the Dublin game going, let's be honest, fellas, that we needed a game like this to get us going. We needed something to light the fire. We know that we obviously were beaten the first round of the championship in Ulster by Monaghan. I'll never forget on the bus on the way back from that game, the Monaghan fans were battering the bus on the way down the hill in Clonard. Talk about crying into your beer. It was just a really, really long trip home that day. Going into the Dublin game, that's what Joe said. He said, we've been flat, we've been needing something to light the fire. That was his exact phrase. And against Dublin, you know when the house is going to be full against Dublin, you know that you have to be on your A game. We knew that we were going to have to raise our game significantly to try and beat that Dublin team again because they had so many stars on every line of the pitch. And let's be honest, Cluxton is arguably the MVP of the last 25 years. He's the player, probably more than any other player, who's transformed Gaelic football with so many medals and so many, I guess, impacts in shaping the culture of Dublin football. So we knew we had to be in our game. We won the game, and again, sure enough, it did light our fire to go the whole way to the Ireland final. In terms of memories of the league games in Crossmaglen, to answer your question, Conan, in Crossmaglen, my memories of early days of playing in Crossmaglen for Armagh was helicopters overhead. Literally helicopters overhead. I remember playing in a league game against Galway, a really brilliant Galway team. I think Jaff Fallon was playing. And I remember the helicopters coming overhead, and Jaff Fallon was just about to kick the ball, and he looked up, was distracted by the helicopter. So, of course, when you're playing there, and the British Army were still around at that time, you do get a sense of this is a fortress. We can intimidate players and team here, not by being tough for them, but just by the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you find that, Ray?
Yeah, I remember going up there as a minor. You knew you were going into the Lions then, and it wasn't it was a very intimidating place, even as a young lad going in. Never mind being a grown man trying to play a National League game, but certainly I seen a different part of the association in Cross that day. It was really, and as Enda said, there was a chopper coming in, but while we were doing the warm up, when we were going, we were, born and bred in the south side of Dublin. We weren't seeing helicopters and British police, carrying guns and stuff like that. It was very intimidating.
So you didn't need fireworks outside your hotel room to wake you up?
No,
There was a car on fire?
Exactly, the car had been burned out. I'm not sure. I don't want to say. I think there might have been a bombing or something, or a car on fire from the day before. So it was.
I don't know, yeah. It would spook you a little bit.
Well,
Like, just sort of put you off your game in some sort. So what's, I suppose this game now coming on Sunday, I know it's not a do or die match, but it sort of is if you want to get through to the quarter final. Whoever loses is in a tough spot then, because they both have to go to a neutral game. Against Derry, I assume will be desperate for something, for anything, and Galway, who will want to progress as well. So neither team wants to lose this match, but it's the first time Dublin in the championship at Croke Park under the new rules. Like, this is a big chance now to sort of see where they're at, because I think if they played the way they played against Galway, I think they're favourites for the All-Ireland to do that every week. But it's just whether they can do that every week.
Yeah, it depends which Dublin team shows up, Conan. I was talking to Gabriel Bannigan, the Monaghan manager, on the way in, and I didn't realise whoever wins the group goes straight through to a quarter final, and then second gets a home preliminary whatever game, and then who's third is away from home. So you don't want to, you certainly don't want to be losing on Sunday, and I'm sure Geese or Desi, they want to be getting straight to a quarter final, and you don't be leaving anything to chance. But obviously Cavan beating Mayo a few weeks ago, Donegal getting turned over last weekend was a little bit of a turn up. A lot of Tyrone supporters probably won't agree with me there, but you want to keep momentum going. You want to get wins under the belt, and as Enda said, the season is so condensed. We're going week after week, so I'd say both teams will be going for hell for leather to get a win on Sunday. Yeah.
Alan, you must have watched that game against Galway and thought, this is, like, Kieran Kilkenny can do that, like Con O'Callaghan can do that, like all these boys that stood up, hired, even a Cofic Byrne, like the size of him, he could be catching every ball he wanted. Like, that was just players doing what they can do, I think, but it's just whether they can do it every single week.
Yeah, like I think sometimes mentally you just need a game where your backs are to the wall and we need to go out here and put a performance in, and that can go either way. thankfully for Dublin, they put the performance in. They've got a great win under their belt, and look, it puts them back in the frame. Whether it puts them back in the frame to win an All Ireland, I think Sunday will tell a lot about that. Looks like Con is out, like he's obviously a huge loss, but the prize is huge for both teams. Not even in terms of you get straight into a quarter final. I think like in terms of the development of the year and stuff, like I know coming off the back of winning All Ireland last year, and I know from us in 2011, like that's a tough place to be going into the championship next year, and it's not until you're really in the melting pot that you know you're really like, are you really ready or not? And kind of Sunday mightn't tell that either. Like it's still a group stage game, so there's still a lot of football to be played this year. But I think like in terms of both teams' confidence, like if Dublin get a win at the weekend, it's going to give those young lads that Dublin are going to need, like the Patrick Coffeyburn, those lads, huge confidence going into the next stage. If Armagh get a win, all of a sudden they're right. Last year is gone. We're back in the frame here again, and it's a hard thing to do the year after winning the All Ireland. And I mentioned there, them being flat in 2003. We were definitely a bit flat in 2012 after winning 2011, so it'll be interesting to see what our Armagh team shows up the weekend as well.
Not to ramp up the stakes any higher, but obviously everybody wants to avoid the last 12 because it's a game in between the quarter-final. You could be away from home, like Ray says, but basically the last group game then, if Galway beat Derry, which they probably will, that means whoever loses this match between Armagh and Dublin are going in on 2 points, so that's a knockout game then as well, their last game. Like they have 2 points going into their final match they need to win. Like, so basically they'll have a knockout in that match, they'll have a knockout in the last 12, then they're in their quarter final the week after that. And it's only been 2 years like so far of the structure, but the team who's won the All Ireland has topped the group as well, you know. But
it's a lot of football to play in a few weeks with injuries and stuff. And lads are probably carrying, the season is so short now, lads are probably carrying little knocks and niggles already, like they're getting strapped up to train to play matches and stuff. Obviously we don't see that from the stands or from the TV, but you can be sure there's 3 or 4 or 5 lads on each team that are managing injuries already. So to go 3 weeks in a row is going to be a tall ask for lads.
And you must be looking at this Armagh team and thinking it's very similar in terms of, I think, psyche, athleticism, like toughness, and the way they can play football as well. Like especially when they go direct, they can look similar to your team. It must be a team to be proud of up there.
Everybody's incredibly proud. I think when we won it, we were so proud and inspired, particularly for the old people of Armagh that never experienced any success at that level. I remember whenever we won it, you know, the players get a chance to bring the Sam Maguire to their own home with their own club, which is always very special. My mother and father and I are 79 and 80 years of age, but back then, obviously 25 years ago they were in their prime of their lives, and they encouraged us not to bring the cup round companies and round, let's say, organisations and get a few pound for bringing the cup in the door. That's probably an unsaid, unwritten thing in Gaelic games. You get a few pound in cash for bringing the cup in the door. My mum and dad asked us to bring it around the old people's homes for people that, you know, literally cried when they seen the cup and brought it into the old people's home. They cried when they seen the side of the cup. But now I'm more inspired for the young players. And I think that's what the great Dublin team of the last 15 years have done. They've inspired generations of young players to dream big. What Kieran McGeeney and his coaching staff and players have done is they've inspired a generation of Armagh players to dream big long after the Troubles, to dream big for their futures and their careers. We're inspired by that. If you're asking me about the Armagh way, because you asked the boys about the Dublin way, the Armagh way of now and back, I'd say, back in the day was a sense of a club Armagh. It's not about Crossmaglen or Clonagale. It's about the county is, in essence, a club. Second thing, Kieran McGeeney was always the epitome of this, was team first. Not about any individual player, team first. Of course, Jim Gavin created that culture in Dublin. Work ethic. Kieran McGeeney's work ethic is relentless. I don't need to put that in a highlighter pen. I think everybody in Gaelic games understands that his work ethic on and off the pitch was and is relentless. He created a Spartan type mentality in Armagh back in the day, and I think the current group of players have that Spartan type mentality. There's leaders in every line in Armagh now. There was back in the day, and he's created that again today, including the bench. They've got a very deep bench, probably the deepest bench in Gaelic football. The fundamental skills back in the day were really strong. I would argue they're as strong today, possibly even stronger in some positions. And lastly, 5 years ago, Kieran had all those things in place, but I don't think the game plan was quite there. Today, they've also got the offensive and the defensive game plan.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is going to change every week, but Enda, who do you think is going to win the All-Ireland right now?
I think if you're, let's say, ruling Kerry out, you'd be mistaken. If you're ruling Armagh out, you'd be mistaken. If you're ruling Dublin out, you'd be mistaken. I'd put in that category would probably be Donegal. I think any of those four all equal for me. I don't see anybody who's super more favoured than any of those four.
Ray?
I suppose the form guide, you'd have to say Kerry. Having won the National League, won a Munster Championship, but they might come in uncooked, Conan. That's the problem, you know. As Enda said, I wouldn't dismiss, you know, the other three names that he mentioned there. But if you were to say, you put the gun to my head, I'd have to say Kerry. You know, they're probably getting their house in order. They've probably got time to recover. You know, Paddy Clifford back this weekend. They have strength and depth. I'd probably lean towards Kerry. You know, Dublin haven't lost players last year. Listen, I couldn't dismiss any of the northern teams. And maybe it's the shot in the arm. Donegal being beaten last weekend. I thought Armagh were hugely impressive last weekend against Derry. Obviously, the heartache of losing the Ulster final, they had bounced back off that. And then Galway, you know, if Galway could get their act together after that defeat, that could be the shot in the arm that they need to get their season back on tracks and get, you know, Comer and Shane Walsh back fit. So, you know, it's still wide open, but I'd still lean towards Kerry with everything. That's the way that the season's going to pan out for them.
Yeah, Galway will be alright. They have a rehabilitation service for all these counties now. Armagh lose the Ulster final, Derry will come along and you can beat them. Galway lose to Dublin, Derry will come along and you can beat them. Alan, who do you think? I'm not going to put a gun to your head, but
Yeah, I think, look, as both the lads say, it's very difficult to call at this stage. There's a lot of football to be played over the next few weeks. Probably if I was to pick one, it probably is hard to look past Kerry at this stage, I think. Dublin, obviously one performance last week. In the games before that, you wouldn't have been convinced. Now things could change very quickly, as they did last weekend. Similarly with Armagh coming off last year, things could change this weekend. If they beat the Dubs this weekend, they're right back in it. But I think it is hard to look. But I think it's great that and unlike maybe not last year, but a few years before that, where we'd one or two or three teams capable of winning, all of a sudden we've 4, 5, 6 teams really competing, and at this stage really believe they have a chance of winning the All-Ireland. It hasn't been like that when the Dublin kind of team from the 1 to 5 North 6 or whatever was really dominant. There wasn't 5 teams in the country thought they could win the All, really believed they could win the All-Ireland, whereas now there is.
You wouldn't be really comfortable with the new rules as well, and the 2-pointers. You know, it has a different slant to it. You know, it's not as though you're coming in all off a blank canvas. The rules are going to have an impact as well. You know, the buzzer, you know, 2-pointers. It's not as straightforward as trying to predict with the rule changes.
Yeah, and the only game we've really seen championship wise is the Leinster final live in Meath, and Meath were sort of on top for a lot of that game, but live were getting the goals, the 2-pointers to keep themselves in the game. And
goals back kept loud in that day.
It's going to be interesting, lads. Thank you very much. Ray, the next time you run into Gabriel Bannigan on the way in, bring him into the Bloody Studio so we can chat to him as well. So Ray Cosgrove, Alan Brogan and Enda McNulty, that was brilliant. Thank you very much, and thanks a million for listening. We will be back on Monday with you.